Elijah Lemon Esley was born on a farm near New Boston, Illinois on October 21, 1866. He had three brothers: Thomas, who died as an infant; David, who died of lockjaw when he was 15; and William. His father died when he was just 2 weeks old. His mother was Avarilla Margaret Noble. She was the daughter of David Fruit Noble and Sarah Pratt Noble. David Noble and his family lived in Elijah Township. He was justice of the peace, postmaster, school director, and a farmer. They had 7 children. E.L. Esley went to school 3 months of each winter until his 18th birthday. He attended Brown's Business College in Davenport, Iowa, and then moved to St. Louis, Missouri. E.L. married Elizabeth Porter in 1888. They had a son, Elijah Porter Esley, who was born in 1889. His wife died of uterine hemorrhage when the baby was just 2 hours old. Being unable to care for an infant, he left his son to be raised with his wife's parents, Joseph Ross and Hannah Porter. He worked as a stenographer in St. Louis for 2 years, and in May 1890, he went to work as a salesman in Chicago, where he continued to work for 4 more years. In his free time, he worked on his own projects, and in 1893 received a patent for a wrench that he invented. In 1895, he married for the second time to Mary Jane Clark. By 1897, he was employed at McDowell, Stocker and Company as a salesman, and by March 1908 became vice president and treasurer of that company. He left there in April 1908 to help organize the E.L. Esley Machinery Company, taking the position of president and treasurer. The company made and sold heavy metal machines that were used in fabricating car bodies and frames. By 1909, business was growing rapidly and was forced to move to a larger 3-story building. E.L.'s son, E. Porter Esley, now in his early 20s, moved to Chicago and began working for his father at the company. He would eventually serve as vice president and general manager. E.L. was a tall man with firm convictions and had a great personality. He looked for the best in his employees, as seen here in this advertisement. He enjoyed golf, shooting, bowling, and fishing. He and his wife lived in Evanston, Illinois. They would stay 4 months of the year in Florida, and he would return to Mercer County nearly every year to hunt. He was an exceptional golfer and enjoyed playing in many tournaments where he won numerous trophies. They made their home in Miami Beach, Florida after retiring. He remained active by playing in golf tournaments. E.L.'s son, E. Porter Esley, passed away in August 1954. E.L. and his wife made contributions to many projects, but had a devoted interest in Mercer County, where he never forgot his roots. He felt strongly that a community should remember its heritage, and he wanted a place where historical items from Mercer County could be saved. By 1954, discussions began, and after much planning, the Mercer County Historical Society was organized in 1955. E.L. donated the money to buy the land and to build the museum according to his specifications. He followed the construction and developments with great interest from his homes in Chicago and Miami. The total amount received from him was $90,950. Sadly, Mr. Esley died a few weeks after the building was completed. The first meeting was held on January 29, 1955, and articles of incorporation were filed. In February, Reed Gillespie owned 4 lots at the corner of Maple and D Streets. The 4 lots were purchased for $4,000 to be used as the site where the museum would be built. It was to be known as the Esley Noble Memorial Exhibit Hall. With Mr. Esley's assistance, the building plans were drawn up and called for a full basement which would be used for exhibit space and storage, and the main floor would contain a reception area and additional exhibit space. The main entry would lead to a marble-floored lobby where a circular reception desk would be located. Interest was growing in the community about the Historical Society. In order to keep the momentum, the board participated in the Centennial Parade to advertise the society. According to the plans, the cost of construction would total $75,977, which was over budget, so changes needed to be made to reduce costs. They eliminated the marble steps leading up to the building, the marble flooring inside the museum, the glazed tile in the restrooms, as well as other revisions. The building plans also changed. Now it would be a 1-story building without a basement at 40 by 100 feet, with a 100-foot frontage and a heating plant and restrooms in the back. The cost of construction now was estimated at $67,500 and was to be completed in 6 months by October 1st. Construction began in April by the Carl A. Nelson and Company of Burlington, Iowa. It was completed in late September. Plans were made quickly to have a building dedication ceremony due to Mr. Esley being in poor health and wishing for him to see its completion. The dedication was held on September 19th. Richard B. Allen, President of the Board of Directors, stated that night, "This is the beginning of an organization which will be welcomed and needed." A grand opening was planned for the middle of November, but Mr. Esley died on October 1st, 1956. The total cost of construction came to $69,080, nearly $2,000 over what was expected. More than $10,000 was still owed to the Carl A. Nelson and Company, but couldn't be paid as the Esley estate was withholding funds due to legal matters with his will. By the summer of 1957, the Historical Society still had not received the funds from the Esley estate, so the board agreed to file claim against the estate for $12,500. This was the amount contracted to the Historical Society before Mr. Esley's death. The museum now has remained closed for 15 months, since it was dedicated in September 1956. In January, the $12,500 was finally received from the Esley estate. Plans were made to get the museum open after sitting empty for more than a year and a half. Board meetings began again, but had to take place at a local church, as there were no chairs or furniture at the museum. The first order of business was to enlarge the board of directors to 25 members, with at least 1 member from each township. It was also decided to have monthly historical programs following each meeting. Reverend Vern Wortman of Sunbeam was accepted as the first official member of the society. Having no knowledge of museum procedures, the board contacted the Illinois State Historical Society to learn about policies concerning donations of items. Plans were made to make an inventory of the items currently being stored in the museum, which were items left by Mr. Esley that he wanted to be on display. Some display cases were purchased, as well as 50 folding chairs and 3 tables, so the board could have meetings there. Meetings would be held in one part of the building, which separates from the main space by a movable partition. A formal open house was held on Sunday, October 18th from 2 to 5 p.m. During the 2-hour program, there were talks by state and local historical groups and a musical program. Richard Allen, the first president of the board of directors, spoke about the period of planning the building and the early organization of the society. A biographical sketch of the Esley family was given by Rose Marie Esley Berger. Over 200 people attended the open house, and many businesses donated flowers for the event. The museum was not yet open to the public, but it was hoped it would be by spring. Cabinets were still needed, and interior painting also needed to be done. Plans were also made to convert the oil heat to gas. Money by this point was running low, so a campaign was started to get at least 1,000 new members. 5,000 flyers were sent out to Mercer County residents. Anyone becoming a member before January 5, 1960, would be considered a charter member. At this point, there were 115 charter members. Memberships were $5 a year for 19 years and over, and 50 cents a year for those 14 to 18 years old. In May, the museum purchased all the furnishings of a closed jewelry store in Monmouth, Illinois, which provided 60 feet of wall showcases, storage cabinets, and drawer space. A contractor was hired to put the cases into place, then refinish and repair the cases. The museum was now able to accept donations. But now there was a need to have someone to be at the museum to accept and catalog the donations. Era Dean Finch was hired to be the first curator. In April, the Aledo Girl Scouts planted a rose bush in front of the museum. In June, flowers were added to the planters on either side of the entrances by the Nature Lovers Garden Club. Crushed rock was added in front of the building to allow for parking of cars. More chairs were added to increase seating capacity. For a donation of $4 each, the donor's name was placed on a chair. Discussions began about possibly getting a one-room schoolhouse that would be located on the back lot. For the museum's second anniversary in October, arrangements were made to have the History Mobile stop at the museum. Inside, there were 18 cases along the sides of this traveling museum, which told the history of the Civil War. Each case was devoted to a single phase of the war and was arranged in chronological order. Problems with the building began to surface. Several of the windows, once opened, could not be closed again without great force. In April, a shade tree was planted by the William Dennison chapter of the DAR in front of the building. More problems were had with the windows and now the roof. Mrs. Winifred Kendall became the new curator. In March, the furnace went out. Showcases were purchased from the Duncan Jewelry Store for $10 each. At the Mercer County Fair, new brochures were passed out at the grandstands each afternoon. A horse-drawn buggy was also driven in front of the grandstands to advertise the museum. In August, the museum float appeared at the New Windsor Fair and Rodeo and New Boston Fish Fry parades, taking second place at each. Wirt Nursery of Alpha did landscaping and planting of new shrubs in front of the building. For the year, 2,098 people signed the visitor book, including visitors from France, Germany, South Africa, and Mexico. A public address system was purchased that plays continuous background music, including Civil War tunes. Laura Parks is now the new curator. More problems with the building began to show by summer. Water damage caused by leaks coming through the masonry created loose plaster on the east wall. Waterproofing of all the concrete blocks on the east side of the museum was done to solve the problem. It was decided to keep the museum closed during the winter months of January, February, and March, except by appointment. Discussions began for the need of a large metal shed to house farm implements. The cost of genealogy research was set at $1.25 per hour. In order to operate, the museum needed at least $2,000 per year, which equaled to needing 400 members at $5 per household. So the Mercer County's 400 program was started, hoping to get 400 paying members for the year. In April, the decision was made to purchase a schoolhouse. The purchase was made in July of the Fairview School, located in Preemption Township. Over $4,000 was raised to finance the purchase, the moving, the construction of a new foundation, furnishings, and any necessary repairs. The cement foundation was poured in September. The schoolhouse was moved in November and placed on its foundation. It was hoped to have it ready for visitors by the spring. By spring, the windows in the museum began leaking, so discussions were had about closing off some of the windows. During heavy rains, water would leak through the north windows, which caused some of the plaster from the walls to land on the displays. Work on the schoolhouse continued into August. Painting was done on the inside and outside, and the windows were repaired. The bricks used for the schoolhouse chimney were donated by the Hydraulic Press Brick Company at the Shale City plant. A new roof was also added. In December, the museum building was closed for repairs. A few windows and the south door were to be permanently closed to have more wall space for exhibits and to stop the leakage problems. No meetings were booked until the building repairs could be completed. The William Dennison chapter of the DAR planted a red maple by the schoolhouse. While doing the repairs to the windows and doors, the workers stated that almost all of the plaster on the walls had begun to detach from the cement blocks. Attempts to replaster it could not be done, as it would not stick. Repairs to the doors and windows were at a standstill. More and more plaster continued to fall off the walls throughout the spring and early summer. The museum had to remain closed. It has been closed now for 6 months. It was necessary to remove all the plaster on each of the 4 walls due to the moisture on the walls. It was suggested not to use plaster again, which would result in another failure. Instead, using furring strips and then attaching sheetrock. The museum was closed for the entire year. In January, the workmen were still at the museum completing repairs. By March, the work on the interior of the museum had been completed, but painting and cleanup work still needed to be done over the next few weeks. Everything in the museum needed to be cleaned due to the dust from the plaster. The museum had been closed since December 1966. Plans were made to open in April. The northwest windows were permanently closed, and the south door was also permanently closed, to have more wall space for the exhibits and to stop the leakage problems. The 2 west windows were also closed with pegboard to make more room for displays and to keep out the sun. The museum held its first meeting and program back at the museum on April 22nd. At the meeting, it was decided that the historical programs will now only be held 5 times a year instead of monthly. Plans were made for an additional storage area to be attached to the museum building and a large metal shed in which to display farm implements and equipment. The Aledo Music Club presented the first program back, titled Mercer County in Review. The museum officially opened back up to the public on May 6th. The curator, Laura Parks, resigned in December after 4 years. When the museum opened for the year in April, Laura Parks decided to continue on as the curator. However, she was unable to do so until September, so Mabel Vance took over until her return. By the middle of October, the schoolhouse was completed. A dedication ceremony was planned for October 27th. Invitations were sent out to members and residents of Mercer County. The schoolhouse was decorated for Halloween. The lamps were glowing, and the potbelly stove was used to warm the building for visitors. It was so hot it even blistered the new paint. There was a tribute to Blanche Cameron for all the work she did to obtain the schoolhouse. It was titled, "This is Your Life, Blanche Cameron." Mrs. Cameron spoke about the hard work it took to obtain the schoolhouse for the museum. When the board decided that we would like to have a schoolhouse for the museum, many different ones were offered to us. We had to consider how to get one over bridges on the way to Aledo. This schoolhouse we chose was named Fairview, located in Preemption Township. It was built in 1863 and closed in 1952. It could be taken to Aledo because the Edwards River Bridge was new and wide. We went west through Hamlet, then south down 94 to Aledo. We agreed to pay $500 for it. The chimney had to be torn down. A Monmouth firm agreed to move the schoolhouse to Aledo for $1,000. One man was hired to ride on the schoolhouse to protect the telephone wires, and another to protect the electric wires. When it reached our area, Mr. Fry built the foundation for $721. The chimney was rebuilt, the roof shingled with shingles that were new but looked old, and the building was painted inside and outside. All of this cost approximately $4,300. Where and how did we get the money? I served as chairman and worked from township to township. I started with one township and found someone who would be a township chairman. The township chairman would secure the rest of the workers. They would write the name of each person in their area who had attended a country school and where. They would ask for a donation, no matter how small. At the end of the month, all the workers would meet and bring their reports and the money collected. This was repeated in each of the 15 townships. The time consumed doing this was over a year and a half. The total amount raised was $4,303. After the dedication ceremony, the box social was held. Lyle Boltinghouse auctioned off 20 boxed lunches, and $129 was raised. The year closed with memberships of over 500.